couch.
Hello, and thank you for checking out the Just Here in the Dark podcast with me, your host, Sean, on this Weird Wednesday. You can check in on the podcast every Sunday and Wednesday. In between, I'll be dropping strange short stories. But let's get into our first story. In 1998, Jane Fishman, a reporter for the Savannah Morning News, began a series of articles about a possible haunted antique bed in the home of Al Cobb of Savannah, Georgia. Cobb bought the vintage late 1800s bed at an auction as a Christmas present for his 14-year-old son Jason, a purchase he would later regret. 3 nights later, Fishman reported Jason told his parents he felt as if someone had planted elbows on his pillow and was watching him and breathing cold air down the back of his neck. The next night, he noticed a photo of his deceased grandparents on his wicker nightstand was flipped down, so he lifted it back up. The following day, the photo was facing down again. Later that morning, after leaving his room for breakfast, he returned and found in the middle of his bed 2 beanie babies, the zebra and the tiger, next to a conch shell, a dinosaur made of shells, and a plaster toucan bird. That got his parents and his twin brother Lee's attention. Trying to make sense of the irrational, Al called out, "Do we have a Casper here? Tell me your name and how old you are." Then he left some lined composition paper and crayons and, with his family, walked out of the room. In 15 minutes, they returned and found written vertically in large block childlike letters, Danny 7. With his family out of the house, Al Cobb decided to continue trying to communicate with the spirit Danny. With the same kind of notes, Danny indicated that his mother had died in that bed in 1899 and that he wanted to stay with the bed. He also made it clear that he didn't want anyone else sleeping in the bed. Jason, who had moved out of the room, decided to stretch out and pretend to take a nap. That, says Al, was a mistake. Jason says he remembers when he doubled back to his room to pick up his clothes when this terracotta head that had been hanging on the wall came flying through the window, just missing me before it smashed on the closet door. No one really knows. Fishman writes in his second installment, who or what is leaving these copious notes, moving the furniture, opening the kitchen drawers, setting the dining room table, flipping over the chairs, lighting the candles, arranging the posters to spell out a person's name, Jill, then hanging the unfinished product on the bedroom wall. Jason also spoke of other spirits. Uncle Sam, who had come to reclaim his daughter, he said was buried under the house. Jill, a young woman who left a number of handwritten messages, among them one inviting the Cobbs to a party in their living room. Parapsychologist Andrew Nichols, head of the Florida Society of Parapsychological Research, investigated the case. What happened at the Cobbs, he told Fishman, more specifically to Jason, what had happened without Danny or the bed. It was the electromagnetic energy of the wall that Jason started sleeping next to when they moved the bed there that charged the psychic ability that the boy already had. After hearing that, I always have the question, why stay in a home after you find out it's haunted? Me, myself, I would just pack my stuff, leave, take the L. But I have had some paranormal experiences of my own. Alright, I remember this particular time when I was a teenager living in North Philly. So me and my brother Teef were both in the basement, sitting on the spare bed playing Pokemon Stadium on the Nintendo 64. After a few hours of playing, we both fell asleep on the bed in the basement. No big deal. But for some reason, a few hours later, I woke up and I was looking towards the bathroom. And while looking towards the bathroom, from the corner of my eye, I can see the steps leading to the main floor. Alright, and here comes the strange part. And I have told this story many times, but it has always stayed consistent. I promise I've seen this. So what I seen was my sister's Barbie walking up the steps. Yes, the Barbie was walking up the steps by itself. So after seeing this, I just placed the blanket back over my head and it took me a while, but I eventually fell asleep. That next morning, told my brother, and we beat the shit out of this dog for a while. I don't know what we were thinking, I don't know. Just some kids in North Philly doing some North Philly stuff. But that's what happened. On to our next story. H.H. Holmes was the alias of one of America's first serial killers. During the 1893 Columbian Exposition, he lured victims into his elaborate murder castle. Herman Webster Mudgett, better known as H.H. Holmes, was a con artist and bigamist who was one of America's first serial killers. Sometimes referred to as the Beast of Chicago, Holmes is believed to have killed somewhere between 20 and 200 people. He killed many of his victims in a specially constructed home, which was later nicknamed the Murder Castle. Apprehended in 1894, he was hanged for his crimes 2 years later. Born into an affluent family, Holmes enjoyed a privileged childhood and was said to be unusually intelligent at an early age. Still, there were haunting signs of what was to come. He expressed an interest in medicine, which reportedly led him to practice surgery on animals. Some accounts indicate that he may have been responsible for the death of a friend. Holmes' life of crime began with various frauds and scams. As a medical student at the University of Michigan, he stole corpses and used them to make false insurance claims. Holmes may have used the bodies for experiments as well. In 1855, Holmes moved to Chicago. He soon found work in a pharmacy using the now infamous alias Dr. Henry H. Holmes. He eventually took over the business and was later rumored to have killed its original owner. Holmes had a 3-story building constructed nearby, creating an elaborate house of horrors. The upper floors contained his living quarters and many small rooms where he tortured and killed his victims. There were also trapdoors and chutes that enabled him to move the bodies down to the basement, where he could burn the remains or dispose of them in other ways. During the 1893 Columbian Exposition, Holmes opened up his home as a hotel for visitors. Unfortunately, many guests did not survive in what became known as the Murder Castle. Many of these victims, no one knows for certain the total number, were women who were seduced, swindled, and then killed. Holmes had a habit of getting engaged to women only for his fiancée to suddenly disappear. Other victims were lured there by the offer of employment. Holmes left Chicago shortly after the World's Fair to continue his schemes, including a plan with an associate named Benjamin Pitzel. The scheme was Pitzel would fake his death to collect $10,000 from the life insurance company. Jailed at one point for another fraud, Holmes confided in a fellow inmate and notorious outlaw, Marion Hedgepeth. Hedgepeth later helped investigators by revealing details of their discussion. While the authorities eventually identified Howard as Holmes, they did not catch on soon enough to stop his final murders. Holmes killed Pitzel and, after telling his widow that her husband was still alive and in hiding, convinced her to let him travel with 3 of their 5 children, who also became his victims. After several weeks of outrunning authorities, Holmes was finally apprehended in November 1894. During this time in custody, he gave notorious stories to police, once admitting to killing 27 people. Convicted in 1895, Holmes appealed his case but lost. Holmes died May 7, 1896. When he was hanged for Pitzel's murder. He was buried in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, my hometown. My initial question after hearing that is, how was H.H. Holmes allowed to rack up a body count of possibly 200 victims? As I thought about this, I realized his ability to remain uncaught was possibly, along with some other factors, due to the fact of his status. Like the horrifying stories we see today coming out about high-powered people committing these acts and being able to do so for so long due to their status in the communities. On a bit of a tangent, this is why social media is such a great resource. A lot of these stories would have been swept under the rug on a traditional platform, possibly due to relationships. See, we here in America have an obsession with famous people. We allow what they bring entertainment-wise to leak over into our personal opinion about the person. But the fact remains, for better or for worse, we don't know these people.